and I saw a body. And is when I realized that is my body. That body did not have life. When I saw the body, I said, oh no, I'm not going back there. And I turned around and willingly left the body behind. I grew up in Bogota, Colombia, with my parents and my sisters. And when we were little, they would leave us at the care of a maid. And when my parents were not around, she really didn't pay much attention to what we were doing. And one day my parents left, and my oldest sister and I decided to go play in the patio of the house. And we found a ball, and there was a big tank, and the purpose of this tank was to collect water. Back then we didn't have a washing machine, so it was for hand washing clothes. And my sister and I started to play cash across the tank. She threw the ball, didn't apply enough force, and then I leaned forward to try to grab the ball, and I fell in the tank. And the first thing I felt when falling into this water was the sense that this water was frigid cold, because Bogota's high up in the Andes, and the temperature in this water had to be very early in the morning, probably 3 to 4 degrees Celsius. So it was this sense, this water is frigid cold. And after that, it was the terror of not knowing like why I cannot breathe. I never had been in a pool or had my head under the water. I didn't know if you are in the water, you cannot breathe. So I entered into this state of horror. And that's when this amazing miracle happened. I was in that struggle, in this terror, when suddenly I entered into the state of complete peace. I didn't need to breathe. I didn't need to come out of the tank. I didn't need to do anything. It was just peace and tranquility and serenity and calmness. And people ask me, how can I remember this? And I always say, how can I forget? The contrast that I experienced throughout this whole very traumatic and revealing experience at the same time was pretty strong. And always say the first thing, imagine the trauma, the experience of drowning. Then it came this contrast in which what I saw the moment I drowned was darkness, because this space was very dark. The tank was very deep, it had a roof, so it was early in the morning. So the last thing I saw with my eyes open when I drowned was the darkness of the space. And incredibly, the first thing I saw once I entered in that state of peace and calmness was light. And it was a light that came from below, and it was able to illuminate the whole watery surrounding. And it's when I said, oh, there is light. And then it came the next contrast, and it was that I was hearing very loudly my heart. Imagine when you're so scared and your heart is beating pretty fast and pretty loud, and I could hear it in my head, and it was extremely loud. The other thing, I was living in a house with two more sisters and cousins and dogs, so there was always noise. And the moment I entered in this state of peace, I experienced the most profound and incredible silence. And it's what I call the silence behind the silence. And it impacted me so much that even after the experience, I craved that silence, and I craved it for the rest of my life. And I would hide in chapels, under the bed, in closets, wherever it was, to go back to that silence. And then now I am in this atmosphere of absolute well-being, and I started to see bubbles, and the bubbles are shining with light. And then it was by, oh God, like what is going on here? By chasing these bubbles, this was amazing, that I turned around and I saw a body. And is when I realized that is my body. And the thing that was a more impactful of the body is that the eyes were open. And it was, and lately I've been discussing that, how it was that knowing that the way that the eyes were looking and like emptiness was like that body did not have life. And then I know that that's my body, and I'm like, whoa, I feel the sense of familiarity, like this is not something different, like I already have experienced this is normal. And then it comes the next contrast. I was born as a very, very sick child. And some people may wonder why children, or why somebody can be born like this sick. And in my case, I know that this was to offer me that contrast. I even mentioned this word contrast because that's the human experience, the one of contrast. And then what happened is, imagine at that moment, I'm feeling the state of complete well being. And I was born so sick that for the first almost 3 years of my life, I never felt anything that sick. I didn't even know how it was to feel well. So this contrast allowed me to see this difference. If I was born like a very healthy child and I was experiencing all this health and this experience happened, I may not know the difference or remember that anything really happened. But because I was born so sick and I was feeling so well, when I saw the body, I said, oh no, I'm not going back there. And I turned around and willingly left the body behind. And then now, the moment I turned around, I started to see flowers and they were blooming from nowhere. And I was picked up by the flowers and I was in that state of bliss. And when I'm floating with these flowers, suddenly I appear just like that in a flash in the maid's room. And I'm looking at her from above, like, like I'm floating above her. And I said, oh, that's Maria. But she was completely unaware of what was happening. Then from there, in another flash, I appeared in my mom's path. She was walking, she didn't have a car, and she was close to her bus stop. Like I said, she left early to go to work. And this is incredible because I think this is what actually validates the experience and what makes this experience so amazing. And is that the moment I saw my mom, I said, oh, that's mom. And at that very moment, she stopped. She didn't hesitate. She didn't give another step. She knew that something was happening at home with one of her daughters. And she turned around and started to run back home. And I'm looking at her from above like, oh, I wonder why she's running. And then at that moment, I got distracted because I saw a dog. And I love animals. And the moment I have the desire to be with the dog, I am with the dog. And then this was so much fun. And I saw a park. And the moment I have the desire to be in the park, I am in the park. So all these concepts, all this experience with time and space completely changed. And now I was having fun playing a game of going places. I could be anywhere, anytime. And then in another flash like that, I appeared in a realm. And this was a realm that was made of pure, bright, intense, shiny light. And it was the moment, guys, when I felt the sense, how I am home. It's like, it was like, now I am back to home. And although I didn't see anybody, it was the sense of not being alone, being embraced. Imagine that feeling of home, warm, cozy. And although I had seen my body suspended in the water, up to this point, I didn't have the clear realization that I was not that body. And it was at this moment when I realized, I am not that body. I am not that. I am this. And I realized myself as a being of light. And it's when I also had that sense that I was dissolving with everything that was. And I was still having a sense of self at that moment, but even this dissolved, and I started to feel I experienced what I call nothingness. Some people call it non-self, some people call it emptiness. I call it nothingness. And to give an analogy of what I mean with this, because people get scared when I said nothing. What do you mean? And someone shared this analogy, and I think is very powerful. And is, imagine you have a stadium, and this huge stadium, and in the middle of the stadium is this little box, and all you thought you were is that little box. And suddenly that box opens, and you realize it's nothing that you think you were, nothing that in your mind, in your concept, you think you were, but you are the totality of everything. So I call it nothingness because it's nothing I thought I was, but at the same time, the realization I was interconnected with everything. I was everything. Even using the word interconnected is funny because it's when you are everything, and that is already that sense of interconnection, abundance. I don't even have a way to describe with words what I experience, but the only thing I could say is experience of absolute presence and pure consciousness. And when I am in this state of being, my mom finally arrived home. And this is another incredible thing. My mom knew exactly where to look. And if she would have wasted more time looking on other places, I mean, the body cannot take more, and I would have completely just be gone, died. But at that moment, my mom went to the patio. She got me out of the tank. And is when my mom, this is another amazing thing, the synchronicities of life. She knew how to do CPR, and she worked with children, and she knew how to do CPR for children. So she did everything she knew to revive me. She said that I was like a raggedy doll. She said there was no pulse, there was not breathing. And then I didn't feel anything she was doing with this body. Like I'm saying to you, I'm already completely detached from this reality. And it was when I felt like I had jumped from the tallest building in the world, and there was nothing I could do to stop from falling. And it was like I was being vacuumed, like I was being pulled back in the body. And my feeling was like, no. And then now I knew I was back in the body, because all the feelings of coldness and the feeling of not being well, and the lack of freedom, and that sense, that expansive feeling was now like going back into the little box again. And I was very, very unhappy when I came back. So that's what happened in this experience. And when I came back, it was that sense of not feeling connected with my person, not feeling happy with anything that was. Like I said to you, I wasn't or I did not want to come back. So after that, I was very angry, and I came back with an awareness that I didn't have before. So when I would look at my parents, I felt the sense like, these are not just my parents. I felt them like they were not just my biological parents. I felt them as my equal, because I had experienced the sense of oneness. And then when I looked at my body, it was the knowing, I'm not just this body. It was the knowing, I am not this girl. I am more than this. And for me, it was hard to play with other children, because I didn't have the sense that I could connect with them. When I look at other children, I would feel the sense, what is happening to these people? They don't know anything. Yeah, and I will go to my mom and say, that's not me. This is not who I am. So I became very rebellious. I refused to eat. I didn't feel the sense that I belong. I felt that I wanted to be there. So it was a very, very hard time in my life. And the other thing that happened is that I came back with abilities that I didn't have before. So right after my near-death experience, like I was saying to you, I was close to 3 years old. And now I could read, I could write, I could answer or develop mathematical problems, I could put together complex puzzles, paint. So I have all these abilities, but I just felt that I did not belong and that I wanted to be back there. So that makes things very, very difficult.
That's impressive, Ingrid. I mean, such a profound story. And it also sounds like through this experience, you've reached a level of maturity at not even 3 years old, right? So you're basically a child, and all of a sudden, you have more understanding of life than most of us on this planet, regardless of our age, right? So it must have been very frustrating that the people around you did not share that understanding, and that in terms of spirituality, you were far beyond what they were able to understand.
Yes, it was very, very difficult because imagine at such age I didn't have the understanding of what was happening, and I didn't have the words. And people around me, especially early 70s, there was not really knowledge like now of near their experiences or anything like this. So nobody understood what was happening to this child. And the less understood I felt, the more I felt I did not belong. And I would cry and I would say, why am I here? Where are the instructions? It was this sense of feeling almost like I was an extraterrestrial being, like I don't belong. And then I stopped eating. I reached the point where I almost didn't even want to be touched. But thankfully for me, things happened, kept evolving in a very amazing, incredible way. And what happened is that I started to receive help. And it was when, after my near death experience, I started to have what we know today as out of body experiences. And it was in these out of body experiences that one day I was surrounded by starlight figures. And in another one of these journeys, one of these starlight figures that was shining in gold shaped itself into a human form. And it showed me that, look, we are the same. And it was that realization of, like, since I have realized myself also as a being of light, it was like, oh, you are a being of light. And from that moment on, I started to feel that sense of, ah, the sense of belonging to something, that I was part of something. I always say, when also people ask me, how can I remember these experiences and all these, I said, is because for me it's like the door never closed. Again, I had the near death, then no long after I started to have these out of body experiences, then now this connection with the beings of light. And I always kept repeating that. And years later, one day the beings of light said to me, of course the doors never close, Ingrid, because there are not doors. What we call God or the kingdom of heaven or universal consciousness or source, whatever we want to call it, is here always, is the essence that we are, is all of that. So the ones that close the doors due to conditionings, due to beliefs, due to misunderstandings, whatever it is us. So little by little, we close the door. But imagine another analogy. Imagine that the sun is always there, is always shining. And we're the ones that we can go into a room and close the door or close the window, the shutters, and not let the light in. But the moment we open the door or the shutters, the light, the sun is always there, always giving, always present. So it was just knowing through time that the essence that we are, that light that we are, is always, always there. And this is the other thing. At the beginning, I was having this connection with the beings of light only when I was having out of body experiences. But another teaching that I had the clarity later in my life also was revealed through time. And it was that at the beginning, I felt that I had to go somewhere else because It was during these out-of-body experiences that I started to connect and communicate with these beings of light. But later on, one day we have to go to balance, and then I spent a lot of hours sleeping because I wanted to be there. And since we got a new maid and my parents kept working, and this lady saw me sleeping, okay, I don't have to take care of this girl, and then she let me sleep. But how I was able to reach balance, it was one day I'm taking a shower. I'm 4 years old, and then I'm taking a shower and I'm all relaxed in the shower, and is when a blue intense light appeared in the bathroom, and is when I said, how the beings of light are here. And once I started to see the beings of light here, I started to feel the sense of being able to play with my sisters, eating. I started to feel the sense of home, being here, the sense of belonging, and their presence was so loving, so embracing. So later in my life, I understood that home was not a place. I didn't need to go anywhere. Home was a state of being. But of course, I was too little at the time to understand what was happening. And then I kept throwing a big tantrums. And the first time that at to this point, I could feel their presence. I could smell the scent. It was incredible. Or I could feel. It was that sense of just being there with them, but I could not hear anything. And the moment I started to hear is when I was throwing, like, I threw a big tantrum. They were calling me for dinner, and they were calling my name Ingrid. And because I didn't feel very attached to my name or to my persona, I would just feel the sense that when they call me Ingrid, it was like, don't call me like that. I just was like feeling like that's not my name. And then the maid came, we're calling you Ingrid for dinner. Why you're not coming? And it's when I said, don't call me like that. That is not my name. And then she said, then how should we call you? What is your name? And I said, I do not need one. So imagine dealing with this child. I didn't understand why people could not see or experience what I was experiencing, and they couldn't understand nothing about my nature. So they sent me to bed and crying. It's when I heard for the first time when the being so light said to me, it's going to take time for them to understand that names are not needed in the realm of the light. For me, it's like, and they say, as you already know, and for me, it's like, I know now why I do not need a name. So it is that understanding that, yeah, in our human experience, names, labels, all these are needed. I had to later and in my life have that clear, but I knew in the core of my being, in my heart, that I did not need to be labeled. I didn't need a name. That's why also in my life, when people ask me later, like, what are the names of these beings of light, or how do they look like, or how's their appearance? For me, from the very root, I never needed to have names or forms or anything like that. I just was experiencing that light, the very light from the core of my being. And even when I was surrounded by many beings of light, and I was seeing them as shiny light, and I didn't need to have the shape of a mouth or form or anything like that, I knew who was talking. So that this was incredible, because it's now going beyond the need of having form. Or of course, if I'm seeing lights and stuff, that's also an expression of form, but is going a little bit more into not needing really to label anything. So from very, very early days, and then now I started to receive teachings, and I started to feel like, okay, I guess if it, because of this, let's call it guidance that I started to receive, it was for me more bearable to be here. And these beings of light also said to me that my experience, an experience I was going to have someday, I was going to share. They also said to me that people will be put in my path to help me and guide me. And the first person that actually validated and guided me in knowing that there was nothing wrong with me was my mom. And I wrote a book about all this, but the way she realized it was because of drawings and the things I was saying and on that. And then through all these drawings and everything, we also discovered that I also could see auras. And later the person that, and my mom, she validated that what was happening to me was real, because she also could see things that others couldn't. And she brought to me the clarity that she could see what we call spirits. So later on at the age of 6, I could see spirits too. So there's just all the stories around that. But the person that actually opened the path for me for spirituality, because one thing is having an experience, and another completely different thing is to understand it. So it was my grandmother who guided me through the path of spirituality, meditation, calming the mind, understanding. She started to bring me books. I started to read at very young age, and that's how the path of spirituality actually started to open for me.
I love that. There's so much to unpack there. But where I wanted to go a bit deeper in is, you talk about the beings of light, and you also talk about being a being of light. So, can you explain to me, how do you define beings of light? Is everybody a being of light, or is it just people that live in a different dimension? And what is their role in our lives?
I think that in the core of our being, we are all light. We are all the light of consciousness. And when I asked the beings of light what was our purpose and what was our mission, they said to me, the true purpose of each one, each individual, each being, is to remember that you are the light of consciousness. And then we can say that we are, and the core of our being is always that light, and that potential light ready to be expressed even more. So we're made of potential light and embodied light. We are the light of consciousness, and our work is through calming the mind, through deeper understanding, through deeper connection, through doing all that inner work to remember. And through all these contrasts that the human being, formless and form, give us, is the possibility to remember who we truly are. And I said, people say, how can we even forget in the first place? And I said, imagine, and everything give us the possibility to see through symbols and analogies. I said, imagine the sun again, to give you an analogy. And then from the sun, there's like all the rays of light. And then you are one of those rays of light. And when this ray of light came to be, it's like a little baby. Like when you have a little baby, pure, innocent, beautiful, but the baby doesn't know where he or she comes from. It doesn't know. So you have all the journey to remember who you are, to understand who you are, the nature that you are. Oh, and that is through contrast. You start to know what you are not actually. Oh, I'm not this, I'm not this, I'm not this, until you peel all the layers and you get to the core of what you are. So the beings of light said, always your purpose is to remember that you are the light. And guess what? That light, life itself. And then your mission is to shine that light. Shine it wherever you are, in whatever you do. Because some people think, oh, the moment I become self-realized or enlightened, or I remember, or I am spiritual, that means that I have to abandon my home and my job and go somewhere else. Said, no. It's that the moment you remember you are the light, it doesn't matter where you are, having the possibility to shine that light. It might be that you change your vibration, and that your vibration become higher, and now there's things that are not for the purpose of your growth or your evolution, and then changes happen, and you might leave this job or this situation because simply you vibrate differently. But once you awaken and you realize you are the light, you shine in that light wherever you are. And you are able to even produce change in the world, because now others can, or you can serve as a vehicle for others to remember that they are the light too. And with the beings of light, and again going to contrast, so there's many different ways in which the light of consciousness manifests. And in some of us is this embodied light that we manifest in this more dense state of form. But there's life that manifested in all different ways, even as a wave, even as a particle, even as a photon of light, even as vapor, is all different ways. So beings of light are just beings that do not manifest in this dense form. But it's just incredible, because when I was little and I was 6 years old, this is another way in which the beings of light show me the contrast of how we can see all different aspects of the form and no form. And it's just incredible, because when I was little and I was 6 years old, this is another way in which the beings of light show me the contrast of how we can see all different aspects of the form and no form. And I started to see what we call spirits at the age of 6. And the first time that I saw a spirit, I got very scared. And I was like, oh, then because it just caused me, I just, the way I saw it is all perception. The way I perceive this thing that I saw was, let's call it like a shadow, like a dark shadow figure. And I got really scared. And then I ran to my mom, and because she had revealed to me that she could see spirits, I said, Mom, the beings of light and the spirits are not the same. And then my mom said, explain, because she thought we were seeing the same thing. Imagine, I was little. Whatever I could explain at the moment I did. But when I now had this really clear view of what a spirit was, I told, no, Mom, this is not the same. So I explained, and my mom started to cry. And it's when she said, I think that you see angels. And I said to her, I don't think they're angels because they don't have wings. See, it's all about perception. And then, of course, we learned the Catholic. I grew up as Catholic, and I knew the Catholic teachings and angels and things. And then my mom said, but they have to be your guardian angels. What else can it be? See, we didn't know anything else. And then, since I now could communicate with them, I've been doing it at the time, couple of years, I went to them and I said, first I asked, what is with these dark spirits? And I call them dark because they cause me fear. And they said to me, I was expecting to hear, you're very different. And this was incredible, because they say that you call spirits, you, as the core of our being, we're all the same. Is that validation? We're all the same. The difference is the awareness that you have about who you truly are. That's all. It's all perception. And after that, I said, my mom called you angels. Is that what you are? And they said, you can call us whatever you are. Later in life, when I started to learn about ascended masters, I asked the same, are you ascended masters? And it's when I learned at that moment, they said, the answer was incredible, because it's when I learned that the universe, it presents to us in the way that you need it for your evolution. And again, they said, you can call us whatever you want. See, and it was that knowing, and I said, then what is the difference? And again, is how evolved you are. So also these beings, the way they present to us, and they have different levels of evolution and awareness. And that's what makes also the difference. So say that you're just seeing what we call a spirit guide, or a spirit, simply spirit. They say some of these beings are so attached to the matters of this world. The fact that you die doesn't mean that you remember who you truly are. You may have a little bit more clarity, but doesn't mean you really already know. And the reason they say I could feel fear, or the fear happened when I met this what I call a spirit was because of vibrational frequency. That's it. So that being was vibrating lower. And for us to be connected with what we call beings of light, you have to be vibrating very high. So it's just a different in vibration. That's what caused the fear. I say to people, imagine that you are a radio and that you need to put your dial in certain frequency. So you have to, or put your antennas in certain frequency to catch certain waves, then you have to tune yourself to that. So it depends where you are, where your dial is, that you're going to catch those frequencies. So it's all about tuning.
Wow,
Yeah.
it's so beautiful. And I know that amongst the work that you also do workshops and master classes teaching people how to connect with their beings of light, how to increase their vibration, how to be in better state. Can you tell me a bit more about that?
Yes, because I always say to people, it's important to remember that it's not the experience, it's not the experiences, but what is behind the experience. So the idea with our life and the contrast that our life is offering day to day is how we're able to calm the mind, connect with inner wisdom, and know deeper what is all this for. There's this beautiful sentence that I like to share every single time, and it's like, what is in the way is the way. And we can use whatever is in the way and whatever is part of our life to become, or to practice, or to be present, or to become conscious. I said everything, all the tools have been given to us. We can use our senses as doors to awareness just by paying attention to what we're doing, to what we're drinking, to what we're eating, to what we're seeing, to what we're smelling. It's just use this as a way to connect with your presence, your attention. We can also use our emotions as doors of awareness, is just paying attention. What is there? How I am feeling today? What is present in my life? We can use our thoughts when we meditate and there's 10,000 thoughts in the head. People get mad. I just have thoughts in my head. And I said, no, it's not how many thoughts you have in your head, but how many times you caught yourself thinking and you're able to come back. So it's using everything. I teach people to use everything that is here to realize absolutely everything is an opportunity for me to become aware, to become present, to become aligned. And the way we start probably could be with practices that at the beginning can be like, oh, this is another thing to do. But I also teach people to use the practices in a very fun way. I always say to people, what are you doing when you're heating the water for your tea, for your coffee? Nothing. Waiting. Then what about one conscious breath? One conscious breath. That doesn't take anything. I mean, the minute you're hitting your water, couple of conscious breaths, and you're already helping attuning yourself for that day. I said, people, what do you do when you get up of your bed? Touch the ground with presence. I always think every day I get up and I said, what if I'm eating my toast today? Or what if I would have the idea of bake a cake today? How I want to make this cake, or how I want to eat my toast in the morning with the best ingredients, with the best butter, with the best jam. And I will go and picture that in my head. And if you're eating something that makes you feel incredibly well, that's how you're going to share your day. But imagine that I'm going to bake a cake and I'm going to put the worst ingredients, and I'm going to bake this cake with poison, with worry, with anger, with stress, with already starting my day feeling the sense of overwhelm. So I'm going to bake a cake that is poison, and I'm going to poison everybody else. So I teach people all these different tools and offer analogies that make them realize it's in my hands to make my life a joyful one or a miserable one. I love this teaching about a student that go ask his master. It go ask, Master, you told us that this life is to be joyful and calm and open and happy and peaceful. And the master said, I never said that. The only thing I said is life, and you choose how to live it. So that's what I offer to people, the opportunities to learn how to live life in a way that you feel that you are opening your doors to presence, to consciousness, to balance, to alignment. And then that way you feel that you're living a life of purpose, that you truly live in.
I love that. And I think many people, especially the more critical ones, will listen to this and say, oh, Ingrid, I think you've just had the easiest life. Everything just worked out for you because you talk about being aligned. And I bet you always find a parking space when you need one. Everything you've wanted was just out of reach for you. So that's where I want to talk a bit about trauma and about the challenges of life. Because the one thing that I admire most in people is people that manage to turn challenges into learning opportunities and manage to mirror those opportunities as lessons for people that are going through them. And you're a wonderful example of somebody who has gone through hardships because it wasn't all a walk in the park and it wasn't all easy. And now you're helping other people to move through their trauma, through their depression, and move forward, find a way forward whilst dealing with their feelings. Can you tell me a bit more about how you process negative experiences, how you process challenges with the lessons that we can all take from it?
Yes, yes. Thank you for bringing this because it's so important for all of us. Like you say, it had not been easy. Starting from having even these near-death experiences that came to happen in my life in themselves were very traumatic experiences. I also grew up in a family with my parents were forced to marry. There was a lot of unhappiness right there in our home itself. I grew up in a country at war. I also grew up feeling that I didn't belong. Like I mentioned at the beginning, thankfully I had this guidance of the beings of life, but even that was hard because imagine feeling isolated in a world that nobody sees or understand, not even remotely what you're actually experiencing. Thankfully, like I said, my mom had access, or I don't know what I would have done to know a little bit or understand a little bit what I was at least seeing. And my grandmother thankfully guided me to go deeper into connect with the truth that I am. But other than that, the kids around me, the rest of the world around me did not understand who Ingrid was at all. And after my first and second near death experiences, it was the sense I wanted to be there. I wanted to go back there. It wasn't until I had what I call a big awakening and my third near that experience that completely shaped these feelings that I was having. But for that, imagine I had to pretty much spend 39 years experiencing what we know as existential depression. I went through many, many, many years of not really having the capacity to integrate everything that had happened, understand. I would cry and I said to God, why did you send me here with no instructions? How can I understand, or how can I be here? I don't know how to really be here. So it was many, many years of experiencing difficult things. And the ones that have the chance to read my book, experiencing also the need to belong, brought me to find very challenging relationships and meet people that also brought a lot of suffering into my life and even misunderstanding. And then I had other accidents that happened in my life, many challenges that happened that brought me to a point in my life when I wanted to commit suicide. I reached the point where there was a night that I thought, I'm done. I don't want to be here. And it's when I would call it the dark night of the soul. And there was a moment that was so critical. I already had my little baby. I was going through a lot of hardship emotionally. I lived in a war zone before that for 3 years. I learned what, oh God, misery, what even fear, deep fear. Every time for 3 years, I didn't know if I was going to be alive next day. Although I lost the fear of death, it's different to die than to not know how you're going to die. Am I going to be kidnapped? I'm going to, I don't know, be shot. I'm going to die by a bomb. It's this anticipation, this stress, this constant state of not knowing. It was extremely hard. And but one thing I have to say, after I experienced all those years of hardship and trauma and difficulties, that it opened my heart to big empathy, to big compassion, to knowing that, wow, I care. But that day, in that night that I was lying next to my little son, he was 3 years old, and I was going through a time of such deep depression that for a second in my life, imagine, and I understand when people are going to these difficult times, because I was lying on the bed, and for a fraction of a second, I thought, I cannot leave my son here. What if we just live together? And in that very moment when that thought crossed my mind, I thought, oh, wow, I lost it. And it's when I went to deep prayer, and I was like, oh, God, universe, source, forgive me for even have any thought like this. And I said, and then a deep prayer came, and my prayer wasn't, God, change this, change that, give me this, give me that. It was, God, help me see, because I have become blinded. God, help me see, because I cannot see. And it's when I just allow myself, this is another thing, it was that sense of just allow yourself one more day. And then I calm down and say, let's just allow myself one more day. And then I was able to fall asleep, slept for a couple of hours, woke up. And when I woke up, it was that clear message about going to see a psychologist. It was like, you need help. You cannot do this alone. I always felt the sense that I could do it alone, that I didn't need anybody. And then I understood the message, and I went to my computer at work and I looked for a psychologist. And then I found this name, a person with really good reviews in my area. And then that very day, I went to the cafeteria to eat lunch. I met a friend, and then we're sitting there, and then she named the exact same person. And so what are the odds that I had this person written in a paper, and she named this, she said, oh, my daughter is seeing this person because she had an accident, blah, blah. And then I met another person the same day. And so 3 different sources, same name. That, what a synchronicity. So I was like, I understand, I get it. The universe is transmitting these. One thing I didn't mention is that for a long time, I cut my connection with the beings of light. There was a moment in my life where I just felt that I needed to experience my human experience, and that I needed to be on my own. So again, you have the possibility to read the book. That happened when I was 19 years old. And then all these very hard challenges just happened in my life, because until I was 19, is like, imagine, I put the analogy of walking in a room with the lights on. If you walk in a room with the lights on, you know where all the furniture is. You don't trip, you're good. But the moment I cut or I was saying about the radio, I changed my vibrational frequency, I cut my communication with the beings of light. It's like I turn off the light on the room. And if you're walking in a room with the lights off, you trip with the furniture, you cannot see anything. So for those 20 years, it's like I was in a dark room. And when I went to see this psychologist, the person was actually very open, very spiritual, very understanding. And he asked me to write a list of all my sufferings. At the beginning, I was reluctant, but okay, I wrote the list. It was a very cathartic experience. And then I brought the list to him. We read it together, and he said, in my 37 years of practice, I have never seen someone suffer this much and be mentally stable. And he said, wow. And at the time, people may ask, oh, but I was even having in the outer reality a good job. I was doing good. I was working for NASA, but in my inner, I was just devastated. And then it's when I asked the doctor, of course, when he said my 37 years, I'm like, oh wow, I never even thought I was the one that suffered the most or anything. And I said to him, the first thing I said to him was, why me? And then it's when he gave me the answer that I needed to hear, that turned the lights on. He said, why not? And at that moment, he started to say, look, thanks to this, you have done that. And thanks to this, you this. And thanks to this, you that. And at that moment is when everything started to make sense. And I found purpose behind everything. And it's when I can say that 3 miracles happened. The first miracle was when I had that realization that everything, absolutely everything had happened for me, not to me. Thanks to everything that had ever happened, I was sitting at this moment with this absolute clear realization. All of it always happened for me, for my evolution, for my understanding, for my openness to compassion, to empathy, to love, to greatness, to peeling layers, everything, to know what I am not. So it was that at that moment when I understood that everything happened for me and not to me, I entered in the state of gratitude. Again, thanks to this, and thanks to this, that. The other miracle that happened was that it was that realization that the only truth that I was experiencing at this moment was that I was sitting in front of this doctor and nothing else was there. Everything else was a thought in my head. My only truth was that now presence, I'm sitting in this office with this person, and that's all. The rest, because it was all in my head, I could decide what to do with it. So imagine the sense of inner power. I have the power to decide if I stay as a victim or I find purpose behind everything. What is this for? What is this for? What is this for? And then the other miracle, the third miracle that happened was that I discovered the true meaning of forgiveness. And it was, again, once I know that everything is happening for me and not to me, it was this, and I entered into gratitude. So imagine, it's like, what is to forgive? If nothing ever happened to me but for me, there's nothing to forgive. Or I could say two things could happen. There's nothing to forgive, or everything is forgiven. So that's how my process of starting to take and understand my challenges as paths, as what is in the way is the way, as opportunities happen. And maybe before I end this part of the conversation, I can give an analogy. I always love the analogy of a bird in a nest. Imagine that you are a bird in a nest, and it's like, oh, this bird is so comfortable, so good in his nest. And suddenly the mom come and say, it's time for you to leave the nest. The mom has that knowledge inside. I could take always two paths and say, my mom or life is terrible to me. Or I can say, yeah, it's leave this nest. I grew up and it's time. But say that we make the decision or the determination that I'm going to stay in the nest no matter what. Then the challenge of the nest becoming too small happen. The challenge of the nest being all dirty because the bird is doing everything in the nest happen. The challenge of not having food because now the mom is not coming happen. So all the challenges start happening. But the bird is very persistent, and the bird doesn't want to leave this nest, doesn't have the awareness that it has to move on. So the bird start going through a lot of challenging and then a lot of suffering because it's resisting. So now, if the bird doesn't leave the nest despite all these challenges, one, it could starve to death, and or two, it could just really other forces pushing hard, and it could happen that there's a big storm, that there's, I don't know, wind, whatever, until finally the bird is being shaken so hard out of the nest that the bird has to fly. And the moment the bird jump out of the nest, it opened the wings and fly. So if all this didn't happen, the bird would have never known that it could fly. So again, everything is happening for us, not to us.
I think that's an amazing mindset, Ingrid, and especially knowing what you have been through, to have come to this realization and to stand here today saying it's happening for us and that's the way forward. I think that's nothing short of amazing. To people that are struggling right now with depression, with anxiety, I absolutely love your strategy of take it one day at a time. You don't need to survive the year. You don't need to survive the next 10 years. You don't need to make it until you're old. You just need to survive today. And tomorrow is tomorrow's problem. And if just today seems too daunting, break it down even further. It's this hour, and then it's next hour, and it's the next 15 minutes. And I've heard that before from people dealing with chronic pain. Just take it 5 minutes, find a time interval that you can bear, and it's 5 minutes. You just need to make it through these 5 minutes and then the next ones.
Yes, and I tell people to write a list of the things that have worked, because the mind and the negative bias have the tendency to stay in everything that hasn't worked. But if you still here, look at your resilience, look at your strength, look at your capacity to stay alive. You are amazing. So make that list. Who are your allies? Even an ally can be your dog, can be the weather, can be the TV, can be yourself with your own strength. So make the list that have the things that have worked, and even the things that, thanks to all this hardship, I can understand this other person. I can be more open. I can have the capacity to even write these words and understand the suffering of humanity. That's in itself incredible. So you are amazing. Always remember that.
Absolutely. And one thing I wanted to add on is, think usually when you're depressed or you're struggling with these feelings, you're also struggling with your self-worth. And you often don't see yourself as an amazing, wonderful person, which we all are. But we tend to look at ourselves very negatively, and it tends to encourage a spiral of negativity. And one way I found to deal with this that I think can be helpful for people is I start making a list of everything I've done right, every win I've had, every achievement I've had, every compliment that I can remember. And it can be things that I love about me or things that other people have complimented me on. And it's just a list of proof that the person that I now see as awful and terrible and a failure is actually this wonderful person. And it takes a minute to get into that identity when you're really low in your vibration. It takes a minute. But it gives you, especially when you're a very analytical person as I am, it gives you that evidence that, see, you can't be such a failure. It can't just all go wrong because you have friends around you, you have people who love you and support you. Would they do that if you were an awful human being? No, they would not. So definitely many tools to deal with this.
Yes, yes, yes. And again, if it wasn't for the contrast, how we know we have the wings and we can fly? We would not know that we have that capacity of decision making, that capacity of strength, of again resilience, of even openness. And it's the only way, I said to people, to appreciate, let's call it happiness, is if you have been sad. The only way to appreciate health if you have been sick. So it's like how I offer gratitude to these experiences that are offering contrast, so I can know the other side of it. Is the only way. So it's always like you say, let's write the things that have or are part of that contrast of life and where I am standing there, and try to find that balance.
Absolutely. Ingrid, it's been absolutely wonderful speaking to you. I think we could have easily gone for a few more hours, but maybe we'll do a part 2. Tell me, how can people connect with you and your work?
Yes, I have a website, is ingridhonkala.com. And there I have a newsletter where I announce my mentorings and courses, and I do one-on-ones also. I offer that. And soon I will be actually in Europe. In April, May, I'm going to do a spiritual retreat in Spain. Then I am going to do another spiritual retreat in Prague. Then I am going to be speaking in different cities in Madrid and in Barcelona in Spain. Then I will be speaking in London and in Oxford. So that's opportunities to be in Europe and to meet more kindred, amazing people out there in the path. So yeah, I also have my media pages and many ways to connect with all of you.
Perfect. We'll make sure to add all of the links to the websites and to your social media down below so people can reach out. And I will definitely have a look at your events and see if we'll meet somewhere in the coming months.